Well,
Love
I
it.
mean, if you look at, say, for instance, I lost my train of thought there. That'll be a nice place for me to cut.
Dun,
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah.
Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Klint Macro. Brought to you by Public Safety and Education and the Trigger Pressers Union.
This episode is brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. The right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Meet the Pressers is sponsored by Next Level Training, Saber Red, Cutting Edge Bullets, the USCCA, A.S.P., Common Sense Self-Defense, and T1 Ammunition. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Meet the Pressers. My name is Klint Macro, and this is my esteemed colleague, Matthew Mallory. Meet the Pressers is a safe place for trigger pressers, folks that exercise their Second Amendment right to congregate and fellowship and talk about guns, gear, training, political activism, and sometimes religion. And today we have a very special guest who is one of us, a full-time firearms instructor and an educator. Matt, why don't you do the honor of introducing our guest?
I would be glad to do that, Klint. So Derek LeBlanc, president of the Kidsafe Foundation. How are you, sir? Glad to have you, and I love the wall behind you.
Oh, subtle. Welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
No problem. Glad to have you. So tell us about the Kidsafe Foundation, how it came about, what the brainchild behind it, and all that fun stuff, and what you guys do.
Okay, the Kidsafe Foundation, we're a 501c3 nonprofit based in Oregon. And so my journey to get to where I am today started back in 2013 when I had a situation where I was unarmed, I needed a gun, and I actually caught somebody in my vehicle. So I put him on the ground, ended up fighting with him on the ground for about 10 minutes until my girlfriend at the time came out with my shotgun and saved me. And so from that time, I progressed. I became an instructor. About 2014 is when I started working, developing a program for kids. You know, being from Eugene, Oregon, I was concerned about the Eddie Eagle being kind of well received in my area. And so I kind of looked at other ways, and I started developing my own. And so about 2 years of hard development, and we became a nonprofit in 2016. And now we're on our way. You know, our goal this year would be to roll out nationally. And so far, we reached about 21,000 kids in 4 states and taught them life-saving skills on what to do if they ever came across an unsecured firearm.
Wow, that's
Cool.
awesome.
Yeah, that Eddie Eagle program is very well intended, but oftentimes it's just left at leave the gun alone, don't touch it. And it kind of promotes that stigma that the gun is the dangerous thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't take the next step into, hey, let's educate these people and let's educate these children on how to make the gun, quote, safe and how to properly handle it.
And we've, in my classes, I'll tell my students that I'll say, listen, you know, Eddie Eagle program's great, but what if your kid goes to some neighborhood kid's house and that kid doesn't practice the Eddie Eagle program and they pick up the gun and point it at your kid and put their finger on the trigger? Your kid should know that can kill them. If your kid doesn't know that, your kid's not touching it. Your kid's listening to what you're telling them, but it could still get them killed.
Yeah. And that's what we kind of do is obviously we modeled kind of some of our rules, like the stop, don't touch, run away, tell a grown up. You know, we kind of parallel the Eddie Eagle there, but we kind of elaborate on those rules and we explain, you know, why those rules are important, because, you know, rules give us order, especially at a young age.
Mm-hmm.
And then we branch out into, you know, airsoft, Nerf gun safety. You know, we're talking about anti-bullying as well in our program. You know, we're talking about video games, video game violence, you know, online safety as well. And so the things that we're doing that the Eddie Eagle kind of is lacking is we're kind of making up, and we're kind of bringing it into the new millennium. You know, the Eddie Eagle's kind of antiquated. You know, obviously it's a good program. It's been around for many, many years, but you know, we're looking to the future. And so we're starting to translate our stuff in different languages because we're following the data. You know, there's no education for kids in, you know, Latin homes or Chinese, Russian. You know, we're also working on American Sign Language as well. And that way, you know, we want to be able to reach every kid. And it's
Awesome.
not just the kids with guns in the home. And I've kind of modeled our program similar to water safety, right? Is like we teach every kid in America how to swim because we don't want them to drown. Okay. That's the same concept behind our program. Is it's for every kid. Obviously being from Oregon, the likelihood of my kid drowning in a pool is lower. It's higher to they get hurt or killed with a firearm. And so, but Texas, with the climate, it's completely switched. There obviously water safety is really, really important in that climate. And it's about taking an apolitical approach. That's why we're kind of moderate with our message, and we reach a lot of people that way.
When you look at any time there's mandatory training, many states have mandatory training, and this goes outside of just, basic safety training like you're talking about. It kind of shows that the training is just for one slice of the population,
Yes.
for the person that's going to potentially buy the gun. Well, I think gun training, like you just, alluded in your comment, gun training is for everybody, no matter, whether you own a gun or not. And so when you talk about mandatory training, like it's not really mandatory, it's just for that slice. I think this kind of message at the grade school level across the nation would be a huge service to mankind, and also help those kids to grow up and responsibly exercise their Second Amendment right, because they would know how to do it safely.
Yeah, and so back in 2019, I actually wrote legislation here in Oregon that would authorize our program at all the first grade of the public schools. And we had a good run. There was 37 anti-gun bills that year, and then there was our bill, and there's only 2 bills that got a public hearing, and ours was one of them. Wow. We started that conversation, and it actually opened up a national dialogue. And so when I'm talking to Nebraska, Hawaii, there's lots of interest in what we do, because we can do from day one, we can save lives, and it's through, viable solutions. And it's not about finger pointing. It's about having a common sense conversation about the safety of our kids. And so that's, I look forward to maybe going back next year, depending on, the political climate, and trying again.
Yeah, your political climate in Oregon is pretty hostile when it comes towards the Second Amendment. That's fair to say?
Oh, very, very hostile. We're ramping up right now for another huge battle in the legislature, which, it ultimately will do nothing to save kids. Right. And that's what's lacking here is you have all this talk of restriction and regulation, confiscation, but it does nothing about education. And so that's what all of these politicians are missing is when we don't educate, those kids are vulnerable. We prove that every year when we go into California. We do events in California where there's it's a high restriction rate, high regulation, and there's zero education for these kids. And these kids have, zero experience with a firearm, because every gun that the parents own is now potentially illegal because of a pen stroke. And so the parents don't talk about firearms with their kids. And that's what makes those kids so vulnerable.
That's kind of reminiscent of what's on your wall there. A lot of people think AR stands for assault rifle or automatic rifle, and I love America, and it doesn't stand for American rifle either.
No.
Armalite rifle, and it's been around 50 years, but people still think that it's a big, bad, scary gun. The AR, it's been around for 50 years.
Yeah.
It's become a mindset of, well, scary. Don't go near it. And then,
well, I mean, the answers to all problems are always, and I think it's fair for me to say always, is in education and the free exercise of our rights and liberties. And when you have anti-gun groups that claim to be gun safety advocates, which just burns my skin when they say that,
right?
When you come to them with something like this, an actual program that does educate people and it does help like mankind, they fight it. And that's something a lot of people who aren't involved in their state legislatures or, going to the Capitol to talk to elected officials, they don't know that actually happens. And then they just think that these anti-gun groups are about safety, and they're not at all. It's about the restriction of and limitation of the rights and liberties of law-abiding citizens. And when you do try to bring a message of education, they no. And they don't want to see in California, like you're saying.
Yeah, they don't want the truth getting out, because obviously they're fundraising, all their salaries are being paid off of the misinformation, right? Yeah. And so we have organizations that come in like ours that are, obviously we have a positive message when it comes to safety. Obviously I'm not standing on my soapbox preaching arm every kid. That's, and that's what they think that we do. Obviously what I want to do is arm the kids.
Well, no, they know that's not what you do, but that's what they tell the people that don't know. That's the narrative
Yeah.
they put out. Yeah.
And that was the most interesting part about my legislative run is when we got to that public hearing, we got to present our side. Everything was going well. All of a sudden, the antis, they got their side. They got their opportunity. And fortunately for us, the committee that we're in front of was the education committee. They actually turned on the anti-gunners, which was amazing, because they cited a failed Rutgers study from 2017. And so, that kind of helps me going forward. Now I know where they're going to be. So now I can tailor my message to those legislators and say, okay, we already know where they're going to go. Right. So now I'm going to be here waiting for them. Let's have a conversation.
You're going to ambush them.
No, not necessarily ambush them, but hold the line. Yeah. I want to hold the line. And the way I kind of look at what I'm doing here in Oregon is kind of reverse incrementalism, right? Is they continue to take. Well, I want to be on the offensive. I want to take a little bit back. Mm-hmm. And it's through, a good positive message. It's through, good information being put out to the public. It actually shows that there's nothing wrong with that AR-15, like what you're talking about on the wall. If we look at the data, less than 2% of all violent crimes is committed with a rifle. More people are killed with hammers. Yep. Or, why aren't we talking about fentanyl? We're really concerned about lives. Why aren't we talking about that?
Hey, if we're concerned about young lives, why are there so many abortion clinics?
Right.
Yeah.
The inner city youth, inner city drugs, you got all that, and that's not an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all political. It's all a motive, all a direction that they go in, and they pull the sheep over the wool's eyes, or wolves. How's that go?
Yeah. I don't know we might need something out there too.
Little faux pas.
This is Sarah Joy Albrecht with Hold My Guns, and this is Meet the Pressers with Matt Mallory and Klint Macro.
Meet the Pressers.
So now you brought your message to DC. You were at the DC rally last year, correct? I think that's we originally met last year at the DC rally in person. So that was pretty cool event. And then this year it was online, virtually.
Yep.
And speaking of online, you've got some virtual classes I'm seeing up on your website: virtual gun maintenance, virtual dry fire class, virtual intro to handguns.
Yeah, so we've kind of, as a full-time instructor, I have a separate company, and so what we're starting to do is more online training. Is one thing that we've had to change because of COVID is we've had to kind of change. We were shut down for 2 months. What we had to do is we had to kind of transition from the in-person teaching to online. So we're working on right now with our website for the Kidsafe Foundations. We're working on an online platform where people from all over the country can log in and get educated, educate their families. So we're looking forward to the future and using technology to our advantage. And hopefully in next month or so, I'll finally have the copyright and the trademark done. And so I'll be able to reach out to instructors across the country and say, hey, can you help us educate the kids in your community? And so we can kind of use the blueprint that we developed here in Oregon and use it in those communities to educate and empower. And what's pretty cool about what we do here in Oregon is typically when we're doing events in the public, like we have these big inflatable BB gun ranges, and they're made by Daisy. And so we can blow them up. And so we reached about 6,000 kids in 2020 with these. And so we blow them up, we teach them the 4 basic safety rules, and then we get to shoot BB guns. And so my goal here is this blueprint that we've created in Oregon is we can kind of replicate that in different states. And, typically when we go into an event, there's, Moms Demand Action or something like this, they'll actually pack up their tables and leave because they cannot compete with our energy, our positive vibe. Everybody wants to join. I mean, I haven't have kids from, kids that are wearing red shirts come, and I was like, hey, come, let's learn about safety, and let's, everything's about being encouraging and building up our children.
Yeah, absolutely. And when he says blow up, Matt, I don't know if you've seen it. He doesn't mean like blow up, like you blow up stuff.
Tannerite.
To inflate.
I know. My heart went, whoa, Tannerite. And then he meant like a bounce house. I got it.
Hey,
Yeah.
not a bounce house. I get that so many times. You'd be surprised how many kids I see come running across the gym, kicking off their shoes, come
Really?
sliding into the rain. Oh yeah, they think it's a bounce house. Okay, this is not a bounce house, and they start crying, and it's horrible.
that wouldn't be good.
That makes me think of our zombie shoots. I've had people call and say, "Hey, can I come dressed as a zombie?" I'm like, if you want to get shot.
No, that's not a good idea.
So tell me more about these zombie shoots.
Yeah, just have zombie targets. Have 5 different lanes. One's a hay bales with zombie targets on it with a crossbow, so we're shooting at a basically a zombie target on a hay bale. We got spinner targets, so we've got some 22 bolt action that we shoot at with a scope at a long distance, and then we got some zombie bleeder targets. So it's just teaching people with 22s and a crossbow on safe gun handling and getting them. We've had a lot of people that never thought they'd want to use guns that actually left there wanting to buy guns. So it was kind of a fun event. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had pretty good success with just setting up like virtual training opportunities with just using SIRT pistols.
Yep.
And so people can learn the safety rules and how to apply them in context using a SIRT pistol. Obviously, we're not unloading and having, cartridges come out or dummy rounds, but at least the handling aspect of it. And then usually then they get to shoot it a little bit and they start to kind of sparks an interest and they're like, hey, what's it like to shoot a real gun? And then now you've kind of got the hook set. Yep. But there's a lot of things out there now that weren't, say, 10, 15 years ago, some resources that parents can use to help educate their kids. Your message, that program is there and that's starting to grow more. And then you've got like the books like from Yehuda Remmer. I don't know if you know Yehuda, but
I do.
His kids books. And then, Rob Pincus had a book come out. I think they're doing a collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
I just did an article on Personal Defense Network about training your next generation of family first responder. And of course, like Beth Alcazar from USCCA has written quite a few things. Yeah, so there's a lot more resources available. It used to be such a taboo subject. Either you were in a gun house where guns were just like part of life, or you weren't, and then like no one talks about it. It's like that crazy brother-in-law. No one talks about him. But I think by avoiding the situation, by avoiding it, it stigmatizes it to the point where, what did you say, Matt? Once we were on the show, you tell a kid not to touch it. What do they do when you turn your back? They want to touch it, right? Especially boys.
Yep.
Boys. So definitely. Talk about it. Break down that stigma and encourage them to do it properly and safely. Empower them with the knowledge.
Relating it a lot like vehicles that's exactly the same concept. You put a vehicle's a scary object when you first start driving it. It's scary. It's some big piece of metal. Gun's no different. It's a tool.
Well, and what we're trying to do is normalize the gun. Yeah. Normalize gun ownership. Obviously what the greatest thing that we learned through the COVID and the pandemic and the social unrest that we had is there's tons of new gun owners. We sold 8 million guns.
I think something like that. Yeah.
5 million new gun owners, so they're coming into the fold. And so with that, it's really, really important that we sharpen our message and make sure that we're reaching a broader base. Right. And it's, we don't just say, come and take them type mentality is we want to be welcoming to those new gun owners because, their experience, their backgrounds might be a little bit different from you and I. And so education, we're able to, get them the experience that they need, that they can actually represent their 2A rights in a proper, safe way. Part of what makes us unique as well is we actually follow up with live fire training for the kids.
Good.
And so we do a Kids Firearm Safety 1 class at a Cabela's location. Cabela's Bass Pro Shop. They've been tremendous partners and sponsors of ours.
Awesome.
And so this Saturday, actually, I'll be on the range with kids. And so we start the kids about 6 years old, depending on their maturity, and we start with rim fires. And so, typically on a typical class, we'll get 60 to 70 rounds downrange. And so with 60 to 70 rounds comes 60 to 70 repetitions. Mm-hmm. And that's how these kids are going to learn, is through, a safe, controlled environment that, repetition. And a lot of kids that come to us, the parents never liked guns. They're afraid of guns, but they saw the value of education for their kids. Once they join us on the range, the kids kind of get the bug, and they understand, obviously how the gun works, the 4 basic safety principles, and we get them shooting. And some, probably 22% of the kids that join us on the range, the parents actually buy rimfire rifles so they can continue the education with us. And that's how we expand our base, our footprint, and our 2A, foundation is through, being real good with the message.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
So
Yes,
how many kids do you have?
I have 2.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a lot of this comes, as a parent is, we have to, especially with what I'm doing is in the organization is, I have to show leadership. And that's what I'm kind of leaning on people like you that have platforms is right now we're in really tumultuous times. And so it's really, really important that we, keep an even keel and make sure that we keep our message going forward and focus on, obviously our 2A rights are going to be really important coming into this next presidency. But we also have to understand how we're going to relate with others, especially if we have a platform, is how do we make gains with those that might be on the fence? And because, ultimately it comes down, we're going to need votes.
You can't alienate them.
Yeah. So we need all hands on deck.
Yeah. Agreed. A hearty harumph.
Rump.
Yeah.
What have you found to be the I'd say the hardest hurdle to overcome when you're looking at this whole umbrella of a thought or a goal, a direction? What's been the hardest thing to actually overcome?
Fear.
Okay.
Fear's the greatest, and it comes down to the educators. In the state of Oregon, the teachers union is one of the most powerful unions in our state. And so you'd be surprised how many parents and kids that I've seen that have been told by their teachers that guns kill them. And so basically they're instilling fear of an inanimate object at a very young age. Yeah. And so they come to us, I show them, the AR-15, the big bad AR-15, I show them how it works. I answer any questions that they might have. And they're like, well, that's weird. My teacher didn't say that. My teacher said that little bullet just rips through flesh. And I'm just like, so, as an educator, that's a problem for me, because I think it's really, really important is as parents, we have to kind of monitor what kind of information comes into our kids.
Right.
And so, it comes through either social media, comes through video games, YouTube, the teachers, and so as parents, it's our job to be, really involved and show them that, these are tools, they're not toys. That's why, everybody talks about Nerf guns. I get some heat from the Nerf guns, but at an age like 4 or 5 years old, I don't want kids pointing Nerf guns at one another.
Sure.
And some of the parents look at me like I'm weird, like I'm a FUD. But the reason I say that is what we have to realize is from 2 to 7, our kids engage what's called magical thinking, where they don't have enough life experience, they don't have enough maturity, and they're getting their information from their environments, which is either YouTube, video games, Facebook, TV, violent TV. And so it's
or
really,
parents.
or parents. Yeah. Or parents. Yeah. But, so it's important at that age that, they could be picking up Nerf guns and pointing them at one another. And then what happens if a parent, leaves a gun unattended for a moment and they go to pick it up thinking it's a Nerf gun and the gun goes bang, And so obviously it's just changing that culture, and obviously everything's age specific with us, so obviously if you like the Nerf wars, I support that, but obviously make them age specific, maybe 10 years old where they have enough life experience that they know that this is not real. This is something that and make it kind of playful, I have a lot of parents that actually use Nerf guns as a teachable moment. So they're using Nerf guns to explain the 4 basic safety rules. They're setting up targets and they're doing stuff like that, which I think is a great idea for, because we can teach discipline and safety and respect for the firearm with, a toy.
Yeah. When the article I wrote talks about the things that I had done with my son, and it's certainly not this is how you do it, but this is what worked for me. And I had an old dart gun, just an old plastic dart gun. And I would set it on the table and I would get him to turn it so it was faced in a safe direction, and then I'd just kind of put it on the ground and I'd have him face it in a safe direction. And then I started getting him to picking it up, but keeping his finger outside the trigger guard to have the trigger finger discipline. So just working those two things with the toy plastic gun was very, very valuable. And it translated to eventually I would then start having him check my actual gun clear on the range and have him just do the pinky check and see that there's nothing in there and understand at that point it's an inert, it's an inanimate object or inert. And then it's taking it step by step that way. So there's a lot of ways to go about doing it, but I think those toys can be very useful in an educational context.
Once my trademark and the copywriting is done, is we're gonna be reaching out to instructors from around the country to see what if they would be involved in what we do. And so with the help of Cabela's Bass Pro Shop and some other organizations, we're hopefully going to, turn that 21,000 kids into, 100,000 or 1 million. That's the goal for this is to be able to reach as many kids as we can, because, that's the only way we're going to be able to protect our rights is through that next generation.
Educating children. Yeah.
We should do something together with National Train a Teacher Day, because getting your information to the teachers that take part in that would be a great way to spread the gospel, man.
I would love that. That's what, originally when I wrote that bill in Oregon, it was designed to have the teachers teach our program. Ultimately, these teachers have, they want to protect those kids. And I kind of know what you guys are doing. And I think I'm really supportive of arming our teachers, because ultimately they're the last line of defense in these situations. In Eugene, where I'm from, they actually just stripped the SROs, which is the police out of our schools, which I think is a horrible idea. Because now our students are sitting ducks, so I think, it comes down to is the media and those that want to take away our guns have done a really, really good job at marketing to people that don't know and are afraid.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of our biggest challenge going forward, is being able to kind of awaken those people and say, hey, this isn't necessarily the truth. They only want to report this part. There's this much that goes into this that would help, save our 2A rights, also, protect people, and one thing that's not really reported on effectively is how our guns are used in a defensive manner between 2 to 4 million times annually. And that's an FBI statistic.
That's thousands of people every day.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes down to them not firing a shot, but them having a tool to be able to defend if they need to. Right. It comes down to proper education as well. I mean, obviously, as an industry, I never want to mandate anything. I think mandates are very, very dangerous, especially when we're talking about education.
Agreed.
Because there's so much that's lacking when we put a mandate in there, and they get so rigid that they want to stick to this mandate. And I think, something that's all encompassing would be.
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't mean to stop you, but we have to call it a woman date now.
See, that's offensive to me, because I have friends from all over the country that are different genders, different denominations, and it could be potentially offensive to them. I think why stop at woman? I think it should be a trans man or a trans woman, if we're going to go that way.
That's just getting too confusing.
I don't know.
Still confusing to me.
We need 800 different amens, I think.
I think anything that comes out of Hillary or Nancy's or Joe Biden's mouth is very confusing to anybody.
Well, and we have our work cut out for us, and it comes down to, as educators, as people with platforms, is we have to just be really sharp with that message, and let everybody know that there's help available if you have questions, and I'm scared, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm scared about the war drums are already being beat on the other side. And when we talk, we're going to spend the next 4 years in court, realistically.
Yeah.
And, that's going to do nothing to save a single life. That's nothing, but that's going to spend, precious revenue that we don't necessarily have, because we don't have a billionaire financier.
Mm-hmm.
I've been, really, really thankful for the Firearms Policy Coalition. They've done tremendous work, as of late, Josh Prince, Pennsylvania, these are all, Adam Kraut, these guys are rock stars. And what I kind of advocate for people and people across the country that are listening to this, that want to get involved, is you guys are an expert in your subject matter. Let's put pen to paper. I wrote my Senate Bill 801 in a coffee shop on an iPad. Okay. I took it from that. I got a meeting with my representative. He liked it. He endorsed it. I got 5 other co-sponsors. Now we're in business.
Wow.
From both sides of the aisle, because it was common sense. It was only a page and a half. It wasn't 5,000 pages. It was simple, to the point, and it did what it needed to do.
That's awesome.
And so that's what I would encourage us as advocates across the country is, focus on something that you'd like to see changed in your local state and put in the work and figure out how the system works and the process works and get it done.
Yep.
And that's the way we put them on their heels. They're always on the offensive. Let's put them on the defensive by putting out good, meaningful legislation that can actually make a change for the good.
Great advice.
Sometimes we get caught up in our day-to-day lives and work and business and stuff that we're like, well, we'll leave that to the politicians because I'm busy making a living and trying to provide for my family. And we don't realize that if not us, then who? If
not me, then who?
Yeah.
And I love that, us as gun owners are hardworking, diligent. We take care of our families. But it comes down to is service, right? We have to serve the public or we're going to lose everything. And so we have to make a sacrifice somewhere. If that means we don't go bowling on a Tuesday night because we want to, send emails to our legislator or representatives, or, if we skip an event a week to put in that extra few hours to make the contacts that we need to build the relationships, then that's what we need to do. Ultimately, it comes down to, it is not my responsibility to protect your rights. And ultimately it's everybody's responsibility, all hands on deck. And so, different experiences, different professional experience are going to help influence the way forward.
Tell us how, or tell our viewers or our listeners how they can learn more about your program, maybe talk to you. What's the best way to communicate?
Okay, so you can find us on either Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. We're on TikTok now. Or you can find us through our website as well, kidsafefoundation.org. I'm always available. You guys can shoot me an email through there and I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can. You can also get involved. You can also help support us. There's donation links there. We're also on Patreon as well. And so there's a way, for you to get involved and kind of help keep us going. Our biggest challenge is the funding, because we don't have a Michael Bloomberg in our pocket. We got me and some really good volunteers that, believe in what we do and seeing how it firsthand affects the community in a positive way.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us and coming on the show.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Keep kids safe.
I will.
There's lots of sponsors that make this show possible, like Mountain Man Medical.
Check them out and give them your business.
This episode is brought to you by Mountain Man Medical. The right medical training and gear should be accessible to every American. Mantis. Mantis X helps shooters suck less. Meet the Pressers is sponsored by Next Level Training, Saber Red, Cutting Edge Bullets, the USCCA, A.S.P., Common Sense Self-Defense, and T1 Ammunition. Meet the Pressers is also generously supported by other fine companies, ranges, and our Patreon members. Thank you.
Thanks for watching or listening to our show.
Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, click that little bell thingy so you know when the next episode's uploaded. Support us on Patreon. Come to one of our classes. Host us to come to you and do one of our classes at your location.
And until next time,
Adieu.
Thank you for watching Meet the Pressers.